So the other thing that we've done, in addition to doing some of these calculations, and Councilmember McGowan is far more adept than I am at calculations, but the other thing we did was we sat down, and we've also spoken to Chief Hilinga, we've spoken to the city manager, and we tried to identify any previously unidentified needs that could contribute to further growth of the city's budget. And one of those needs that has been identified is potentially additional police officers and or service officers. In particular, for example, we do not currently have a training officer, which is a position that we have had for much of the city's police force history. It's quite important for maintaining various state accreditations and other things like that. And it's an example of a position that I believe was cut, but would be valuable to have back. So there are a number of positions along those lines, primarily within the police department, potentially within other departments within the city. There's also questions about police pay. We obviously want to attract excellent police officers here. There's obvious reasons for that. We want people to have excellent experiences with the police and excellent capabilities. But there's also liability questions. If we are not hiring the best and the brightest, we are at increased risk for issues and liabilities. And so the bottom line really is we want to keep pace with the labor market. If Torrance...
It's not unique to police. I mean, that's really across all of our hiring needs.
That is absolutely
you call
true.
that out, but...
No, you're totally correct. And some of this, again, can be generalized to some of our other departments potentially. But that's certainly a factor. We've talked at previous council meetings extensively about parkland management and fire weed abatement. And I know that I've personally received dozens of questions and comments from residents about our investment in those areas. We've also seen, and this is to some extent included in that 5.2% increase, but I wanted to also call out the county fire contract increases. They have been variable. We've seen some years that are relatively modest, but we've also seen years that are not modest. So I think that's worth us tracking and really understanding potential future direction there. We also have, infrastructure management and deferred maintenance challenges, including street maintenance projects, water mitigation, sewer, et cetera, that either have been identified as needing additional investment or there's sort of a current question about that, let's say. And then the last thing that the ad hoc has specifically discussed is the need for a capital reserve investment. And we've looked at other cities and other entities. Even the golf course, for example, I think I've heard has a larger capital reserve program than the city does right now, for example. So there's a need, and it certainly can be debated as to exactly what the number is. But there's certainly a need for the city to have reserves. I mean, if nothing else, you think about lawsuits and other, events. We've seen neighboring cities with landslides. I mean, there's a need to have money in the bank. Again, obviously, how much can be debated, but that's something that the ad hoc wanted to be sure was included. We can go to the next slide. So, if you take some relatively modest assumptions, including a couple of additional positions, meeting our current $2 million plus budget deficit, and then the $3 million for capital reserves, and really not a whole lot else, then you calculate a 5.2% increase on it, you end up with this slide. And, the last one, this one, yeah. So you can see that the numbers ramp considerably faster than they did in the previous projection with just the 5.2%. And, obviously, this is subject to many, many more conversations with the full council, with the community, but just as a baseline to start the conversation, these are the kind of numbers that I believe we are talking about. Next slide, please. I've stolen another slide from the mayor.
I didn't like that one, so you can have it.
And I'm including this really for the benefit of the public. It's a historical look back for the last few years on some key things like fire services and police services. And, I think there's a little bit of noise in a few of these calculations just because there were some one-off events and, other things that, again, can certainly be debated and understood in different ways. But I thought this would be useful for folks maybe watching from home. We can go to the next slide.